Welcome to the Avram Davidson universe, where you will get to listen to some of the best short stories ever written. As a youth, Neil Gaiman fell in love with Avram's stories. Philip K. Dick adored him. Ursula Le Guin thought his tales wonderful, and Ray Bradbury compared him to Kipling. Each episode will include a special guest, an amazing short story, and a discussion of that story. Enjoy classic tales such as O'er All the Seas with Oysters, The Golem, The Sources of the Nile, and many others.
How could you be? It sounds like a story to me, yeah. Sounds like a story to me.
Okay.
And starting over here and going all the way over there is my brag shelf.
And what's on your brag shelf?
All the books.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite book on your brag shelf? If you had to pick one book, I'll put you on the spot.
Okay, this has always been a problem with me. My favorite is always the last thing I've done, which is Shadows in the Stone. If you asked me before I wrote that, I would have probably said The Memory Cathedral, because that book has had has really had legs. It's 20 years old now, I guess, but it hit number one on the bestseller list here in Australia. Had like 5 editions in Germany, separate editions, like 2 hardcovers, and that's the it's a novel about Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, wow.
And I guess that got me into the Renaissance. And then I got interested in Gnosticism.
Yep.
And I emailed you. I think about this. It was while I was thinking about the podcast, I realized the influence that Avram has had on my work, because I keep digging. It's all those details. As I told you, that editor told me that I seem to be in love with every line, and and that's I got that blight from Avram. It's the love of the sound, the love of the sound of words, the particular detail that you can't find anywhere else that just changes everything.
Yep. The Shadows in the Stone. I mean, one question I had for you, a little bit off subject. The preview, which I'm going to make sure people see, is beautiful. Who did that?
The trailer.
The trailer. That's beautiful.
That was done by a pal of mine, and her name is listed on the trailer. She was a PR. She's a PR person, and I met her during when I did the Memory Cathedral, and I for publicity with a novel, or this is how it used to be. You basically got a month with your publicists. She was a fine publicist, and she did it as a favor, just for fun.
Wow, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning, and
she really caught, and she did it. I think she did it using a Mac.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, tell me about the first, like, how you and Avram, you're both from New York. When did you guys first cross paths?
This is good. I was thinking about this, and we never did. Okay. I don't think Avram and I ever met, as far as I can remember.
Okay.
We talked on the phone and we wrote letters.
Okay. Yeah, which he did a lot. I mean, a lot of the relationships that he had were through letters, beautiful letters, typically.
Yeah, well, I mentioned, I don't know if it was in the Treasury or in the collection that I did with your mom. I've got it here somewhere. Have I covered it up? No.
I've got it right here.
Okay, that I did with Grant. I think that I mentioned that. Yes, I
Yeah.
think that I mentioned that. I would call Avram and say, the world is terrible, and he would just say, stop being a schmuck. It's probably going to get worse, or just, stop it and go and write or eat a bagel or something. But I loved his work. And I was thinking how I found Avram, and I think it was through Gardner Dozois, editor of Asimov's, who's passed away and was one of my dearest friends. I mean, fame, because we came up as writers together. And I remember that Gardner, or Gargi, as I used to call him, was crazy about the Lime Killer stories, and very frustrated that they weren't, that they hadn't been collected. And so he became this enormous, booster for Avram. I knew Avram only through, through when I did Wandering Stars, because in Wandering Stars, I published 2 stories by Avram, which, I don't think any other author, because, the golem was iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was publishing with Damon Knight's Orbit, and I was reading it, and part of that whole Milford Mafia gang. And when I read Goslin Day, I think it was in Orbit, I'd have to check.
Yep.
I thought, this is, as the old 50s song, or this was poetry in motion. I mean, it was just, and it reminds me now, I didn't know about this then, but it reminds me of Henry Roth's novel, Call It Sleep. Did you know Henry Roth?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he passed away a number of years ago. He wrote Call It Sleep, I think, in the 30s, about the living in New York during, in a Jewish area. 50 or 60 years later, he published the rest of the 2 or 3 other novels, which and became well known. But what Roth did is he was one of the people using stream of consciousness, one of the major, it was a major work, yet the stream of consciousness didn't get in the way. Okay, we're not talking Finnegan's Wake, we're talking about, beautiful prose. And if you look at Goslin's Day and a lot of Avram's work, because Avram was a couple of writers, as we all know, yep. It is stream of consciousness. He uses the deft touch of moving in and out like that, poetically. And in a sense, Avram was like Lafferty, in that you can't copy him. And that's what made him a writer's writer. That's why everybody I know who's in the business loves his work, from Bob Silverberg to,
Yep.
Harlan loved it. But it was because it was jewel-like. It was unlike anything else out there. It was incomparable. The problem was, it was exactly that gem-like quality and the density and the layering and the poetry slash prose aspects of his work that kind of prevented him from having that larger audience, with the additional problem that everything that made Avram a wonderful writer worked against him in terms of publicizing his work, getting out there, doing the dance, and
You mean?
I mean, I think of.
Do you mean personality-wise that
Okay, well, look, I heard that Avram has been cranky with me, but I didn't spend enough time to. But
oh, you can say it.
He was. Let me make a comparison with Lucius Shepard, who was one of my closest pals. Lucius Shepard could have, who I don't know if you know his work, was an absolutely brilliant writer. But he wanted to do what he wanted to do. So he wrote, he wrote a story called The Dragon Graioul, which really hit it. He was given, Bantam contracted with him for a novel, which would have been, which they were seriously going to push. And Lulu decided, I don't want to do that. I want to write this novella. Oh, Jack, I want to write that novella. And so in a sense, he was his worst enemy, because what made Lucius's prose and what made Avram's prose so interesting was the twists and turns and jumps into the stratosphere and dropping into the bottom of the ocean. And it was exactly that kind of way of being in the world that made it very difficult for him to be in the world, commercially.
Right. I know typically I ask this question, which is, what's your favorite short story of Avram's? And I mean, we've been circling around it. And Goslin Day, I'm guessing, is your favorite story. I could.
It's okay. Let me put it.
Can I just say one thing? And the reason I say that is when I looked it up, Damon Knight first did it. Then you reprinted it in Wandering Days. You reprinted it in Demons. It was reprinted in the Treasury, and then where you did the introduction, and then Everybody Has Somebody in Heaven as well. So it made me think you must really like this story a lot.
Well, I think. I did a couple of months ago. I did the Gene Wolfe podcast. It's two guys who are terrific. It's a great podcast, and we were talking about Gene's work, and I remember that I said something, and it's probably relevant here in terms of Goslin, that there are certain stories, there are certain novels that you read that somehow come alive in memory to become your own visceral experience. And those stories on an unconscious level influence you in ways that you don't realize at the time. Like Avram's style influenced my own. Could I write like Avram? No way. I remember telling Gardner Dozois once, I had read a novel by Kosinski, so I wrote a story called The Painted Bird, and I said, look, I know it's going to look just like Kosinski. So Gardner read the story and looked at me and said, Jack, this does not look like Kosinski. And Goslin Day, the rhythms and the lateral point of view, the way that it cascades through the mind as you remember it, almost like kaleidoscopically, has stayed with me all of these years. Now, I've read a lot of Avram's work, and a lot of it has influenced me on an unconscious level. But a novel, for instance, The Phoenix in the Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
But Goslin Day is visual. I mean, I can see that story, and that's why I guess unless I was reading it, I didn't listen to the reading, because the way I read that story, my interpretation of Avram's rhythms are my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's a superstitious fear that if I heard someone else doing it, it would throw off my own rhythm, so to speak.
You know, I think for me, one of the reasons I've enjoyed the audio part, and it may be my lack of sophistication, which is, you know, no, I don't come from a literature background. I'm not a writer, and so when I read a lot of Avram stories, some of them are easy to follow and understand, and there's always a hidden secret, but you can usually figure it out. And then some of them you can't, and sometimes for me, I can read it, then I get to listen to it, and then I have some aha moments, like, oh. And so for me, it sometimes helps after I've read one of his stories to go, oh my gosh, I now I get it, or I missed that. You know, same thing if you read a story 3 or 4 times, you're going to get different things. But hearing someone else's point of view, sometimes I get some aha moment. And when I talked to Ethan, Avram's son, you know, he used to tell me one of the things he loved about Avram, aside from him being his dad, obviously, was whenever he read a story, he could just go to Avram and go, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And Avram would say, oh, this is what it means. And I don't have that. So sometimes it's been nice to have that extra help. Because as you said,
look, I love podcasts. And frankly, other than Goslin Day, I'll listen to any of Avram's stories or novels.
Fair enough. I'll get them all to you.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But that story does, you know, it does. Again, a lot of what we're talking about, you know, hadn't occurred to me, you know, until you emailed me, and I started thinking about this, because you don't focus in on your influences, you just do it. And a lot of this stuff you don't know you do, like when my partner Janine Webb, who's also a writer, but was, you know, an internationally recognized critic, and she was looking at my work and she said, well, your sentences usually have 3 you know, phrases. It goes boom, ba boom, ba boom. And I thought, what? You know, and then I looked and I noticed that was my rhythm. I had never realized it. And so, and anything that I say about Avram's work, you know, I mean, I did get legitimized a couple of years ago. I got a PhD in creative writing because A, it was wonderful fun, and B, they paid me. But it's just what I see in the work. You know, when I was a young guy and just starting out, I think it was at a Nebula convention, and I was chatting with Isaac Asimov, who was a pal acquaintance. We'd always get together. If we got together, you know, at a convention, we would do shtick and have fun, you know. And for all Avram's, for all Isaac's faults, you know, I loved him. And so we were at this conference or convention, and this woman came up to him and said, I can't remember the story. And she gave him this whole interpretation of the Christ figure and all of that, et cetera, et cetera. And when she left, I keep saying, when she left, Isaac looked at me and said, I didn't know any of that was in there. So anything that I've said, that I say, should probably be taken with, you know, with a bottle of salt.
Well, should we go ahead and take a listen?
I'm game.
All right.
I'll go like this, but
All right, hold on.
Goslin Day. It was a Goslin Day, no doubt about it. Of course, it can happen that Goslin things can occur, say, once a day for many days, but this day was a Goslin Day. From the hour when, properly speaking, the ass brays in his stall, but here instead the cat quells on the rooftop, to the hour when the cock crows on his roost, but here instead the garbage man bangs on his can, even that early, Farrelly realized there was going to be a Goslin Day. Night? Let be night. It was evening, and after that, it was morning. One day. Yes or no? In the warbled agony of the shriek scream, Farrelly had recognized an element present which was more than the usual Quetzalcat expression of its pain-pleasure syndrome. In the agglutinative obscenities which interrupted the bang crashes of the yuckles emptying eggshells, orange rinds, coffee grounds, there was, this morning, different from all other mornings, something unlike their mere usual brute pleasure in waking the dead. Farrelly sighed. His wife and child were still asleep. He saw the dim light already creeping in, sat up, reached for the glass and saucer, and poured water over his nails, began to whisper his preliminary prayers, already concentrating on his intention in the name of unity. But aware, the hot, sticky feeling in the air, the swimmy looks in the dusty corners of windows, mirrors, something, attention, here a twitch and there a twitch. Not good, not good. In short, a Goslin Day. Farrelly decided to seek an expert opinion. Went to Crown Heights to consult the Kabbalist Kaplanovitz. Rabbiness Kaplanovitz was at the stove, shamming off the soup with an enormous spoon, gesturing with a free elbow toward an inner room. There sat the sage, the sharp one, the teacher of our teachers. On his head his beaver hat neatly brushed, on his feet and legs his boots brightly polished. In between, his garments well and clean without a fleck or stain, as befits a disciple of the wise. He and Farrelly shook hands, greeted, blessed the name. Kaplanovitz pushed across several sheets of paper covered with an exquisitely neat calligraphy. "Already there," the Kabbalist said. "I have been through everything 3 times, twice. The New York Times, the Morgan Journal, I.F. Stone, Dow Jones, the Daf Yomi. Your name text, the weather report, Psalm of the day. Everything is worked out by numerology, analogy, gematria, nutricon, anagrams, allegory, procession, and precession. So, of course, today, as any every day, we must await the coming of the Messiah. Await. Expect today, not today. Today he wouldn't come. Considerations for atmospheric changes or changes for atmospheric considerations, not bad. Not bad. Someone gives you an offer for a good air conditioner cheap, you could think about it. Read 7 capitals of Psalms between afternoon and evening prayers. 1 sequence is enough. The day is favorable for decisions on growth stocks, but avoid closed-end mutual funds. On the corner by the bagel store is an old woman with a pishka, collecting dowries for orphan girls in Jerusalem. The money she never sends, this is her sin, it's no concern of yours. Give her 18 cents, a very auspicious number. Merit, cheaply bought. She has sugar diabetes, and the daughter last week gave birth to a weak-headed child by a Schwarzer. What else? They examined the columns of characters. Aha. Ooh-hoo. If you get a chance to buy your house, don't buy it. The regime will condemn it for a freeway. Where are they all going so fast? Every man who has 2 legs thinks he needs 3 automobiles. Besides, where did I write it? Oh, yes, there. The neighborhood is going to change very soon, and if you stay, you will be killed in 3 years and 2 months, or 3 months and 2 years depending on which system of gematria is used in calculating. You have to warn your brother-in-law his sons should each commence bethinking a marriage match. Otherwise, they will be going to cinemas and watching televisions and putting arms around girls, won't have the proper intentions for their nighttime prayers, won't even read the protective psalms selected by the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And with what results, my dear man? Nocturnal emissions, and perhaps worse. Is it for nothing that the chapters of the Principles caution us, at age 18 to the marriage canopy and the performance of good deeds, Farrelly cleared his throat. "Something else is on your mind," said the Kabbalist. "Speak, speak." Farrelly confessed his concern about Goslins. Kaplanovitz exclaimed, struck the table. "Goslins? You want to talk about Goslins? It's already gone past the hour to say the Shema, and I certainly didn't have in mind when I said it to commence constructing a kameya." He clicked his tongue in annoyance. "Am I omniscient?" he demanded. "Why didn't you let me know you were coming? Man walks in off the street, expects to find—" But it did not take long to soothe and smooth him. Who is strong? He who can control his own passion. And now, the first things first, or in this case, last things first, for it was the most recent manifestation of Gosliness which Farrelly wished to talk about. The Kabbalist listened politely, but did not seem in agreement with nor impressed by his guest's recitation of the signs by which a Goslin day might make itself known. "Show Simonim," he murmured, with a polite nod. "This one loses an object, that one finds it. Let the claimant come and show Simonim. Let him cite the signs by which his knowledge is demonstrated, and hence his ownership." But this was mere polite fum-futting, and Farrelly knew that the other knew that both knew it. On Lexington, a black-avised Goslin slipped out from a nexus of cracked mirrors reflecting dust at each other in a disused nightclub, snatched a purse from a young woman emerging from a ribs joint. In Bay Ridge, another, pale pink and blonde, snatched a purse from an old woman right in front of Swami Evangelical Lutheran. Both Goslins flicker-snickered and were sharply gone. In Tottenville, a third one materialized in the bedroom of an honest young woman still half asleep in bed, just a second before her husband came back from the night shift in Elizabeth, New Jersey, uttered a Goslin cry, and jumped out the window holding his shirt. Naturally, the husband never believed her. Would you? Two more slipped in and out of a crucial street corner on the troubled border marches of Italian Harlem, pausing only just long enough to exchange exclamations of "Guinea bastard," "Goddamn black," and Goslin looks out of the corners of their Goslin eyes. Goslin cab drivers curse-shouted at hot, sticky, pregnant women dumb enough to try and cross at pedestrian crossings. The foul air grew fouler, thicker, hotter, tenser, muggier, murkier, and the Goslins, smelling it from afar, came leap-sniffing through the vim veil to nimble, snitch, torment, buffet, burden, ugly look, poke, make stumble, maltreat, and quick schmiggy back again to gezzle, guzzle, Goslin land. The Kabbalist had grown warm in discussion, eagerly inscribed circles in the air, with down-hooked thumb apart from fist. "They have the forms of men, and also they have the lusts of men," he quoted. "You are telling me what every schoolchild knows," protested Farrelly. "But from which of the other three of the four worlds of emanation, creation, formation, and affectation, from which do they come? And why more often, and more often, and more often, and—" Face wrinkled to emphasize the gesture of waving these words away. Kaplanovitz said, "If Yesod goes, how can Hod remain? If there is no Malchuth, how can there be Quether? Thus one throws away with the hand the entire configuration of Adam Kadmon, the tree of life, the Ancient of Days. Men tamper with the very vessels themselves, as if they don't know what happened with the bursting of the vessels before, as though the husks, the shards, even a single shattered cortex doesn't still plague and vex and afflict us to this day. They look down into the abyss and they say, 'This is high,' And they look up to an eminence, and they say, "This is low, and not thus alone." And not thus alone, not just with complex dinim, as for example those concerning the fluxes of women. No, no. But the simplest of the simple of the 613 commandments, to place a parapet around a roof to keep someone from falling off and be killed. What can be simpler? What can be more obvious? What can be easier? But do they do it? What, was it only 3 weeks ago, or 4? A Puerto Rican boy didn't fall off the roof of an apartment house near here. Dead, perished. Go talk to the wall. Men don't want to know. Talk to them ethics, talk to them brotherhood, talk to them ecumenical dialogue, talk to them any kind of nonsenseness. They'll listen. But talk to them, it's written textually in the Torah to build a parapet around your rooftop to prevent blood being shed? No. To this they won't listen. They would neither hear nor understand. They don't know Torah, don't know text, don't know parapet, roof. This they never heard of either. He paused. Come tomorrow, and I'll have prepared for you a kamea against Goslins. He seemed suddenly weary. Farrelly got up, sighed. And tomorrow will you also have prepared a kamea against Goslins for everyone else? Kaplanovitz didn't raise his eyes. Don't blame the rat, he said. Blame the rat hole. Downstairs, Farrelly noticed a boy in a green and white skullcap, nodded Crispidine, coming up from inside under his shirt to dangle over his pants. Let me try sortilogy, he thought to himself. Perhaps it will give me some remez or hint. Aloud he asked, Youngling, tell me, what text did you learn today in school? The boy stopped twisting one of his Strubly earlocks and turned up his phlegm-green eyes. 3 things take a man out of this world, he yawned. Drinking in the morning, napping in the noon, and putting a girl on a wine barrel to find out if she's a virgin. Farrelly clicked his tongue, fumbled for a handkerchief to wipe his heat-prickled face. You are mixing up the texts, he said. The boy raised his eyebrows, pursed his lips, stuck out his lower jaw. Oh, indeed? You ask me a question, then you give me an answer. How do you know I'm mixing up the texts? Maybe I cited a text which you never heard before. What are you, the Vilna Gaon? Brazen face. Look how you've gotten your Crispidine all snarled, Farrelly said, slightly amused. Fingering the cinctures passed through one belt loop, then feeling his own horrified amazement, and somehow knowing, as one knows the refrigerator is going to stop humming 1/2 second before it does stop, yet... What is this? What is this? The cords of your Crispidine are tied in pairs? The filth-green eyes slid to their corners, still holding Farrelly's. Hear, O Israel, chanted the child, the Lord our God, the Lord is 2. The man's voice came out agony shrill. Dualist, heresiarch, sectary. Goslin! Take your hands out of my pants, shrieked the pseudo-child, and with a cry of almost totally authentic fear, fled. Farrelly, seeing people stop, faces changing, flung up his arms and ran for his life. The Goslin child, wailing and slobbering, trampled up steps into an empty hallway where the prismatic edge of a broken window pane caught the sunlight and winky-flashed rainbow changes. The Goslin stretched thin as a shadow and vanished into the bright edge of the shard. Exhausted, all but prostrated by the heat, overcome with humiliation, shame, tormented with fear and confusion, Farrelly stumbled through the door of his home. His wife stood there looking at him. He held to the doorpost, too weary even to raise his hand to kiss the mezuzah, waiting for her to exclaim at his appearance. But she said nothing. He opened his mouth, heard his voice click in his throat. Solomon, his wife said. He moved slowly into the room. Solomon, she said. Listen, Solomon, we were in the park, and at first it was so hot. Then we sat under a tree, and it was so cool. Listen, I think I must have fallen asleep. Solomon, you're so quiet. Now you're home, I can give the Heshi his bath. Look at him, Solomon. Look, look. Already things were beginning to get better, and the high priest shall pray for the peace of himself and his house. Tanya Rabbanan, and his house. This means his wife. He who has no wife has no home. Small sighs, stifled sobs, little breaks of breath. Farrelly moved forward into the apartment. Windows and mirrors were still, dark, quiet. The Goslin day was almost over. She had the baby ready for the bath. Farrelly moved his eyes, squinting against the last sunlight, to look at the flesh of his firstborn, unique son, his Kaddish. What child was this? Sallow, squinting back, scrannel, preternaturally sly. Farrelly heard his own voice, screaming, changeling, changeling! Goslin.
All right. Well, I know you stepped out while I listened.
I stepped out, I did a dance in the sun.
But I think for me, great story. There were definitely some areas where I love your interpretation of the story, and there were a couple questions that I had that maybe I didn't understand. So I'd love to hear your interpretation of the story or thoughts on the story, and then I may have a couple of follow-up questions if you don't mind.
Okay, just remember the Isaac story though, because anything I say, Avram, if he was sitting next to me, would have probably, said, Jack, go home, go write a story.
Fair enough. But
okay.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the story? How do you read it? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, in a sense, it's a horror story. If you want to categorize it, the last line. What's wonderful, it's like a day in the life story, and like I mentioned with Henry Roth, it's it's an Orthodox Jew in an Orthodox neighborhood, and there's this one little thing that Avram has changed and invented, and that's Goslin, which Goslin, Gozlin, is a thief, and so these thieves, come out sideways from mirrors and cause havoc. I couldn't prove this, but Avram is interested in mirrors. They appear in other stories. And of course, the Goslins are us. Whether they're our unconscious or who the hell knows. And they invade us, and they could be any of us at any time, and it's looking into that mirror.
Wow.
And it's effective because he does a lot of that with stream of consciousness. I took a note, believe it or not. I mean, you just heard this. The foul air grew fouler, thicker, hotter, tenser, muggier, murkier. And the Goslin, smelling it from afar, came leap sniffing through the wind veil to nimble stitch, torment, buffet, burden, ugly hook, poke, make, stumble. This is your unconscious. This is thoughts as they happen as you're walking down the street. This is your fears mixed with the mundane. This is the poetry of fear. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And in the end, when he tucks his son into bed, he sees the Goslin, and the way he sees it is, the yellowish eyes, and the Goslin never looks straight at you. it's looking at, it's looking sideways. And what he's seeing is he's seeing what's in, what's in all of us, the terrible way we can go.
So you think, that was actually my question, where I was a little confused, was the when he yells, he's with his son at the very end and he says Goslin, and he's looking at him, and that's what I was confused about. So you think that it's still his son, it's just,
well, I don't know. I mean, is he exercising the Goslin from his son, or does he find that? I mean, this is true with certainly myth, legend, folklore, that has it stolen his son, and the Goslin we'll never know that. But you see, it's all of those resonances that make, and I wrote this in one of the introductions, that when you read Goslin Day, or when you hear Goslin Day, you can enjoy the rhythms, you can, and the story, and that, the ending of, oh my God, my son is, a monster. But it's later on, it's weeks later, that the story starts percolating through your unconscious. And it's the whole package that does that. Is it popular fiction? No, because it doesn't read itself. You have to get sucked into the story by the prose, by the rhythm. There's a lot of casual readers who are looking. I mean, popular fiction reinforces what we think and what we know.
right.
Which is great. I mean, I love popular fiction. I love John D. MacDonald. Literary fiction, which this story is, it doesn't just suck you into, it doesn't do it for you. It makes you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And if you're willing to pull the cart, it will change you in that little bit in terms of perception, and it enlarges your need to find more novelty. Now, of course, I could be just throwing an enormous amount of bullshit here. I make no bones about that. But I mean, that's how certain stories of Avram's, strike me. I mean, take a look at the Golem. I mean, the style is transparent. It's almost the opposite of Goslin Day.
Yep.
I mean, Avram can do absolutely straight narrative. The boy looked in the mirror said hello. I mean, the ideas are, of course, very strange. And in both cases, Avram made one change, i.e., a golem in California, and Goslins in
New York, New Jersey.
New York.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
New York and New Jersey.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I had a couple of interesting thoughts that.
Hold on one second. Would you believe that WinZip was trying to overlay an ad as we were chatting here?
Couple of interesting thoughts to me that flickered. I sort of flickered through my head as I read it and listened. We're impacted by things that we have seen, and unfortunately, Ghostbusters.
Right.
Silly, right? Such a silly but fun story, and that I kept having to get that out of my head. Ghostbusters. This isn't Ghostbusters with a silly ghost flying around. It's much darker than that. And yet it kept, so you have to I had to pull myself away from that because that's the universe that I kind of associated with it.
Well, we have to bring our own experiences.
Right.
And this is not, Avram is, many writers, when they describe Avram, they describe him as wry. And there's an underlying humor. Even in that first paragraph, I took a note here, there's poetry, but there's also, ironic humor, where in that first paragraph, he talks about there was so much noise, it's waking the dead. And then, why is this night different from all other nights comes up in it, so that he will be doing, a straight poetic Avramsonian description, and then he'll throw in stuff, which he'll invert stuff, which isn't funny, but he's always lightening the bread.
Yeah. Oh yeah. One other thing that was fascinating for me growing up, just sort of ironic, was when we lost things in our house. If something, our socks, the missing shoes and missing socks, it was always a Goslin that stole it. So that was always in our house when something went missing. Did Avram talk about that at any time before? I don't know. It was my mom. It was more my mom saying.
Okay, from the story.
Yeah, right. But I think it initially, I don't know if it was gremlins at some point, but then it sort of converted into Goslings would steal things in our house. So if things went missing.
When I was looking through the treasury, I had not remembered this. Let's see. Granny assigned the treasury, and she signed it as, it says the Avram Davidson treasury, and below it is, beware the dreaded Goslin.
Oh, that's great.
And I had totally forgotten that, because as you do, you read the book, you put it away, and Granny was terrific fun. I don't even know when I met Granny. It was as if we were always there being silly together. She had a wonderful capacity for being silly and serious at the same time.
Well, this has been amazing. And
well, it was fun. You promised it would be fun. Whether I've made any sense at all, of course, it's a completely different story.
It's been absolutely wonderful. And one of the things that I'm not going to do, which I always do,
right?
I will write it up afterwards, is I always talk about if I turn one of the stories into a little Netflix episode, and I say who would be the perfect person for that part. I'm going to write it out afterwards and not put it in the episode, because I don't want to hear it. I don't want you to hear it. I don't want it to impact your vision.
Well, if you wanted to do that, I didn't want to do that, but I can tell you what I'd say. Ask me the question.
All right. If you were making a Netflix episode of Goslin Day, who would play the parts of Solomon, his wife, and the Kabbalist?
Me.
There you
it's
go.
All in my head. I can't help it. I've got Avram for the rest of my life, for the whatever moments I have left. Avram is in there, like the little Goslin, because there was always that snickery side to Avram, which comes out, and is in there making trouble for me.
Ethan said the most interesting thing, which obviously Ethan knows Avram better than anyone else. I mentioned that Greg Feely and Henry Wessels, they probably, from an understanding of Avram, know his work better than they've done more research into his work than anybody else.
They're both fine critics.
Right. And I said, I mentioned to Ethan that they are the two foremost experts on Avram, and he said, no, I'm the foremost expert on Avram. And he mentioned when he listened to the story, he listened to Or All the Seas with Oysters. He mentioned that was amazing story. But he mentioned, I said, what did you think? He said, it was really hard in some ways because the voice that I have reading it is Avram's voice. Like, that's the voice that he knows. So
that's a problem when you know writers well. I mean, I have that when I read any of Gardner Dozois's work. I mean,
right.
He was like, you know, a brother. I mean, I know when we were together, we would start talking like each other. and my then partner would say, you know, you're talking like Gardner again.
Well, let me, thank you so much.